we spend 95% of our resources in the last few years of life. So health span is even more important than longevity, which means how long can you thrive before you die. There's no embodied consciousness. Only consciousness is conscious of itself.
If you understand this world, this existence as you described it, we essentially can change the outcome of our health and our lives by manifesting them.
Information is a very good word. Information gives rise to form. Everything that is informed becomes a form. But what is informing is a more fundamental level of reality, which actually created the word. And now the word is expanding the experience of what we call the universe.
Deepak, thanks so much for being here and joining the Our Future Nature podcast and also the interview for Travel and Leisure. We're here at the Ruxab Integrated Wellness Resort outside of Bangkok. Why are you here?
We spend 95% of our resources in the last few years of life. So health span is even more important than longevity, which means how long can you thrive before you die. And, I come from ancient wisdom traditions which say that if you know how to transcend the experience of time, and that's my real interest, consciousness, and then you stop or slow the aging process. There's a phrase in the Rig Veda, time is the consumer and we are its food. So while everybody's talking about longevity molecules and signal molecules and diet and exercise, mind-body coordination, I think they're really missing in the consciousness element. How do we go and transcend time to not only slow down the metabolism of time, but the metabolism of time that results in the aging process. So now we know, for example, that less than 5% of disease-related mutations are genetic mistakes or errors. Less than 5% of these genetic mistakes guarantee disease. These are called fully penetrant genes. Even for that, as we speak, there is, CRISPR coming along and gene editing. So metaphorically speaking, you'll be able to cut and paste genes the same way as you cut and paste your email. But that only affects 5%. The rest is epigenetic, which means our experiences, everyday experiences, the eating, breathing, digestion, metabolism, elimination, sensory experience. But how we interpret that, as thoughts and feelings, emotions, desires, imagination, all of that influences how the body recycles. Basically, your body is not a noun, it's a verb. You're recycling your skin once a month, your stomach lining every 5 days, your DNA, which holds the memory of millions of years of evolutionary time, the actual raw material, carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, nitrogen, it recycles every 6 weeks like the migratory birds. So what is it that is recycling? Ultimately, it's consciousness. We know matter recycles, energy recycles, information recycles, but the source of experience, which is beyond time, recycles as energy, information, matter. I think we need a new paradigm for our society that understands that consciousness is the ontological primitive of the universe. Because right now, as you know, the hard problem of consciousness basically says how do neurochemicals and electricity produce the experience of the world, or the experience of the body, or in the experience of the mind. That problem will never be solved because it's based on naive realism, which means that there's an observer-independent universe, and it looks just like this even if you weren't there. Einstein said the moon would still be there if no one was looking. No, the moon is a species-specific experience. Your moon is different than the moon of a horseshoe crab at the bottom of the ocean. And yet that horseshoe crab has an experience on the moon. On a full moon night, it surfaces from the depths of the ocean to mate. And its reproductive cycle is linked to the cycles of the moon. If we understood that what we call natural laws for which there is no explanation, by the way. If you ask the scientists and they study natural laws, how did they come into existence, why aren't there natural laws? They don't have an answer. So what we call natural laws are regularities of experience, and those regularities of experience are species specific. We as humans have the ability to kind of synthesize this deeper knowing, which every living organism has. Those plants, they turn their direction to the sun, to absorb light, photosynthesis, which is the basis of all life. So every sentient being, from plants to bacteria, to rodents, to animals, to primates, to humans, actually has a different experience of what we call the objective universe. In other words, naive realism, which is based on the ontological idea that matter is the fundamental unit of existence, is wrong. In fact, matter is a human concept for a species-specific perceptual activity. And this is what's holding all the progress in the world, I believe. If we understood that consciousness is fundamental, without cause, and is responsible for every experience, including the mind. The mind is not the subject of experience, the object of experience. The intellect is not the subject of experience, the object of experience. Your ego, body, mind is not the subject of experience, it's the object. And when you look at all these great scientific discoveries like quantum mechanics or relativity, general relativity, they always include an observer without defining the observer. And then we say, Einstein's imagination, he was riding on a beam of light. So right there, the premise is wrong. There's no embodied consciousness. Only consciousness is conscious of itself as the body-mind. So we have to go beyond naive realism, even though it works. You use your GPS because of the general theory of relativity. We send each other emails and text messages because we understand quantum mechanics. But that doesn't mean it's getting us closer to the truth. In fact, it's taking us further away from the truth because we are so embedded in the virtual reality, including our own body minds, we think it's real, when in fact it's a superposition of a very fundamental non-local awareness that is appearing as all these infinite knowers, infinite modes of knowing, and infinite things known. If we shift to that, and we allow the self-organization of that, and longevity is a good excuse because everybody wants to live long. But if we shift to that, and there's a critical mass of people moving in that direction, I think we could have a more peaceful, just, sustainable, healthier, and joyful world, because all our problems are based on the socially induced hallucination of the separate self, which does not exist.
Well, I'm glad we got into the weeds of things on the first answer, Deepak. That's a pretty good start. Essentially, what you're saying then is the Einstein model of the universe needs to be revised, and you're talking about quantum entanglement.
They are both incomplete, okay? They're both incomplete. Let's look at the current model of the universe. The universe began as a Big Bang. What caused the Big Bang? Nobody can tell you. There was something called the Planck epoch, 10 to the power of minus 43 seconds post time zero, where there are no laws of physics. So it's unavailable what happened then. Then there's a period of something called cosmic inflation, according to current cosmology, where the universe tripled every trillionth of a trillionth of a trillionth of a second, from the size of a dot to the size of a grapefruit, and then it slowed down, and now it's 100 billion light years across with mathematical precision. According to current theories, we wouldn't have a universe if we wouldn't have that.
The James Webb telescope just showed that the universe is actually expanding far faster than the previous model suggested, and it's not going evenly. It's expanding in different directions. So that's upended our previous understanding about the size of the universe. It seems that every time we put a bigger telescope out there, we realize it's even more infinite than we thought it was. It's even larger than we thought, which kind of goes against the grain of every scientific.
And so there are many loopholes. Cosmological constant, the observed value is different from the theoretical value from what we call quantum field theories, and the discrepancies to the order of over 100 orders of magnitude. So the point is, it all works for when it works, but there are things outside the model that can't be explained, both with quantum mechanics and both with general relativity. And you talk to scientists, they'll say, we'll figure it out. We're not defining who's the we that is going to figure it out. Is it the human brain? Is it human mind? Is it consciousness? Is it all three? What's the connection between the three? You need a human nervous system to even have this conversation. Okay, so somehow the human nervous system and this conversation about the models of reality are integrated in some way that we don't know. But I think these models are really good in expanding our ability to create technology and expand the virtual reality we are already in. But in many ways, they conceal the truth.
But aren't you saying that there is no one observable or measurable truth? You're basically saying it's all a relative truth.
Every truth that we experience is relative. The only absolute truth would be something that's inconceivable and not perceivable, but which gives rise to all forms of conception and perception.
God, divinity.
Yeah, and God is a kind of a risky word to use. Well, I don't mind the word God. If you think of God as the generator, organizer, and the deliverer of this experience. But yeah, pure consciousness, infinite being, fundamental reality, presence. People have used different words: Allah, Brahman, Ein Sof, fundamental reality, the unified field. It, we are the bit of the it, basically, as John Wheeler said.
Right. A very famous Danish philosopher said, Soren Kierkegaard, I don't know if you know him, but I mean, many people have said this: consciousness precedes existence. And in the Bible, it says, in the beginning, there was the word. It was the spoken word. That consciousness is what created this existence.
Yeah. Think of that in terms of language, you see. So if I asked you, what is this? You'd probably say it's a waistcoat. If I asked you, what is this? You'd probably say it's a watch. What is this? You'd say a hand. But that's not your raw experience. If you were a baby, you have no idea this is called a hand or this is called a watch. But you have an experience. What is the experience? Its shape, its color, its form, its sound, its taste, its smell, its feeling. And ultimately, it's one form of sensation or the other: sense perceptions, images, feelings, thoughts. A baby experiences that without giving words to it. But then as soon as you call the shape a hand, it becomes a hand. So what we call fundamental reality is beyond that. It's that which gives rise to color, shape, form, sound, taste, and smell, and then feeling, and ultimately thought, which is the interpretation of all that. But thought is language, okay? So in a way, language constructs, governs, language conceives, constructs, governs, and becomes our experience of the body, the mind, the world. Now we are actually understanding that even more with AI, which is basically a large language model. So there's no human being who can combine the languages of physics and chemistry and biology and mathematics and anthropology and philosophy and every form of human thought and synthesize that based on a few prompts that you feed it. And those are the key to what the AI delivers as information. And information is a very good word. Information gives rise to form. So everything that is informed becomes a form. But what is informing is a more fundamental level of reality, which is beyond the word, which actually created the word. And that's how the word became the flesh. And now the word, with large language models, is expanding the experience of what we call the universe. It's actually mind-boggling in a way, because the more we actually combine our languages, which are modes of knowing, conceptualized, ultimately there's nothing other than modes of knowing and experience, which are in consciousness. But as soon as you conceptualize them, then that perception becomes a tree, it becomes a watch, it becomes the Milky Way galaxy. This is very hard for scientists to accept, because all science is based on naive realism. This is not a condescending word. Naive realism means that the world is real as perceived by humans. What does the world look like to a bat that only knows the echo of ultrasound? A chameleon whose eyeballs swivel on 2 different axes. What does this look like to an insect with 100 eyes? You have no idea. Okay, yet we say that the human perception of the world is the real look of it. It's one of the many infinite looks that the infinite, inscrutable, without form, becomes all these appearances, infinite appearances.
What you're saying is that God does play, does throw the dice. Einstein couldn't accept this cosmological concept, right? He couldn't believe that this superlocation of a quanta or an atom across a large space of time, he just wouldn't accept it.
Yeah, Einstein used many words because he was uncomfortable with the idea that the universe is not real. Okay, he was not a Platonist, as you would say. On the other hand, Niels Bohr and Max Planck and all the other pioneers of the quantum revolution, they were idealists. They understood that you need an observer to collapse the wave function, right? And that was until recently the Copenhagen theory was the most accepted theory. But right now, science is actually dominated by what we call militant atheists, and they'll do anything to avoid the idea that there's an observer, even though even science is an activity in consciousness. Science is based on theory. Where are theories conceived in consciousness? Is based on experiments. Where are experiments designed in consciousness? Is based on observation. Who or what observes is consciousness. So you can't, as Max Planck said, you can't get behind consciousness. And now there are, the most popular theories of multiverse, infinite universes. I accept that, because even those are conceived in consciousness. You can't get behind consciousness. So that's why I
believe in multiverses.
I think that's one of the possibilities for sure. And right now, actually, that seems quite likely. We are 2 trillion galaxies in the known universe. But, if you believe in one interpretation of consciousness, and that, by the way, is also mentioned in some of the ancient texts. In Yoga Vashishta, there's a little invocation. It says, infinite universes come and go in the vast expanse of consciousness, like motes of dust shining in a beam of light coming through a hole in my roof. It's an amazing analogy. You see this beam of light, infinite universes bouncing in and out like virtual particles, which is the new quantum physics.
Right. And it goes back to Plato's cave, of course, the allegory of the cave. And he was absolutely right. What we perceive as reality is actually just the shadow of it.
That's it.
From consciousness.
Yes, this is the shadow of consciousness.
Yeah. So you and I sitting here is not necessarily real. Having said that, whoever's watching this interview perceives it as real.
These are fictional characters in the collective dreamscape. And so are the people who are watching this.
It's all not real, guys. Let's just stop here.
Yeah. But, since we're in the dream, we might as well upgrade it.
Right. So just to summarize then, this is not real. We are essentially expressions in this 3D world of consciousness, the divine, the unity.
Yes. So the only thing that's real is the source of all experience in every sentient being. Now, the experience is different because the biological apparatus is an instrument of certain modes of knowing and experience with a narrow band of a spectrum that is infinite.
Yeah.
And that's, as humans, for some reason, we have the capacity not only to understand this, but actually mathematically frame it. And if you ask mathematicians again, why is mathematics so effective? There's the essay that's famous. What's his name? I forget right now, but he wrote this essay, The Unreasonable Effectiveness of Mathematics. And why so? So is mathematics a fundamental activity in cosmic consciousness or in the infinite? Why does math and even music match the regularities of experience that we call the physical world? Somewhere these are modes of conceptualizing and knowing something that is essentially unknowable, because the more you know, the territory of the unknown and the unknowable expands. Every bit of knowing raises more questions. So, and the infinite cannot be conceptualized. So humans try, they say, oh, this infinite looks like this dead white male, let's call them God, or these deities, or these angels, or these are symbolic representations of that which is not conceptualizable. So everything you see or you have a word for is a symbol of reality. We as humans have the ability to transcend to the source of this and understand this, conceptualize it, and I believe ultimately actually have access to extraordinary abilities, like which are non-local, extrasensory perception, remote viewing, knowing the past, predicting the future, and then create mathematical models to even improve that knowing, modes of knowing. So we are in a very exciting time if we don't blow it right now with climate change and war and terrorism and social and economic injustice and chronic diseases and the insanity of our collective leadership in the world.
It's interesting because you actually trained as a scientist.
I am, yeah.
So you trained in the Western tradition, the allopathic lessons.
Yes, I teach at 3 universities, medical schools, University of California, Mount Sinai.
But a lot of what you're saying would be considered heretical to the scientific establishment.
Heretical at the moment. Although, you might want to look up somebody called Don Hoffman, who's a cognitive scientist, actually, and has a very interesting history. He was charged with solving the hard problem, and he knew Crick, Watson and Crick, and Crick had written this essay called The Astonishing Hypothesis that every experience is somehow created by neural networks in the brain. After 35 years of hard work, Don Hoffman gave up. He said, thinking the brain creates this experience is like Aladdin's lamp. You rub the lamp and the genie comes out and it creates the universe. So he gave up, and now he believes that, he's got a theorem that it's called fitness beats truth. F and B T, the theorem, which means evolution designs us for fitness, but not for truth. And he's got the math and all of that, and works with amazing people. But there's a movement slowly that is moving from naive realism to, you might say, Platonic idealism on beyond, because even idealism, if you look at the Cartesian view, then mind and body are two separate things. That violates the laws of thermodynamics. How does a thought become this biological activity, and vice versa? How do photons go into the brain, create this? Can't solve this unless you go beyond all forms of duality and understand that there's only consciousness and its different modes of knowing and experience, which are species-specific modes.
I mean, we can go some of the directions with this, but bringing it back to longevity, let's say we accept that there's a quantum body, which is what your book's about.
Yes.
We have our physical body, we obviously have our mental, spiritual well-being, but we have our quantum well-being. How does that help me live healthier and longer? And, well, not just longer, but thrive.
Well, look at the dynamics of what we call the quantum field. Everything here is a manifestation of the quantum field. It engulfs you, me, and everything else. And it's non-locally correlated, something that people nowadays frame differently. Entanglement, non-local correlation, by synchronicity, uncertainty, creativity, quantum leaps, tunneling, multiple, clouds of probability. That's all a very wonderful description of not only quantum mechanics, but how your mind operates. And this is a projection of that, appearing as this, but so is this, and this, and all of that is entangled as a process which is unified, because if it wasn't integrated, then either you wouldn't have this experience or it would be a disintegrated experience. So there's some organizing power that spontaneously self-regulates what we call homeostasis. This has direct implications for health and longevity, because well-being is nothing but homeostasis. So, that's what it is, self-regulation. We did a study 2012, 2013, 1-week retreat with meditation, mind-body practices, mindfulness, shift in diet, exercise, yoga, breathing. At the end of 1 week, the level of telomerase went up by 40%. And we had a Nobel laureate as part of the study, Elizabeth Blackburn. And this was an astonishing thing. How can a retreat of meditation increase the level of the enzyme telomerase that regulates your genetic clock? Well, that's been replicated many times. Not only does telomerase go up, but all the enzymes, all the genes that are responsible for self-regulation and homeostasis go up some 17-fold. And all the genes that are responsible for chronic disease, Alzheimer's, autoimmune cancer, they go down. So your experience of consciousness and getting closer to pure consciousness actually translates into a biology which is healthy, self-regulating, homeostasis without inflammation. And the genetic switches that are responsible for healing are turned on. Those that are responsible for inflammation and disease turn off. There's no drug that does that. You combine that with changing your perception of aging, changing your experience of time, being in the present moment, but then combine it with things like mind-body coordination, vagal stimulation, exercise, healthy diet, these days understanding of signal molecules, adaptogens, emotional well-being, resilience, biological rhythms, and you have a holistic approach to longevity, health span. Of course, we're going to die, okay, and that's necessary for life. You can't have birth without death. You can't have death without birth, but birth and death go on all the time. Every thought, as soon as one dies. Every emotion, as soon as one dies. And your body, in order to remain healthy, has to die periodically. There's a process we call apoptosis, programmed cellular death. When a cell forgets to die, it's called a cancer cell. And so cancer is the loss, in this framework, consciousness is the loss of the memory of death. Birth and death go together, like on and off go together. Okay, like any vibration goes together. It goes on, goes off. But what is it that's vibrating? That's not subject to birth or death.
So what we've talked about, I mean, there's many ways we can carry on, but this opens up essentially, if you understand this world and this existence as you described it, and you talked about superhuman abilities, we essentially can change the outcome of our health and our lives by manifesting them. Is that what you're saying?
100%.
Because Deepak's had a pretty good life, right?
Very good life.
Best-selling author.
Yeah, very good life. Yeah.
How does someone get the Deepak package?
You move from survival to adaptation, from adaptation to thriving, from thriving to flourishing, and from flourishing to flow, which means no resistance to existence.
Okay, the final question. You mentioned that the consciousness is unknowable, essentially, or we will never be able to fully understand it.
We will never be able to conceptualize it or perceive it, and yet without it, there's neither conceptualization or perception. But we can actually dive into it and become one with it. And at that moment, all the questions go away. And because even explanations are a human idea, right? The universe doesn't need to explain itself.
That's right. So is the AI conscious, and it kind of helps to get us to that?
AI is super intelligence, but will never be conscious, never experience hunger, thirst, sexuality, existential dilemmas, the fear of death. it might simulate them, but I have my avatar, and he was on CNN, and one of the night shows, somebody asked him, "What did you eat for breakfast?" He said, "I don't feel hungry. I don't have hunger. I don't have sex. I'm a machine." Super intelligent, but not conscious.
Great. Thanks so much, Deepak.
Thank you.
Really enjoyed that.
Thank you.
Thank you. I hope you enjoyed that mind-blowing interview with Deepak, and if you want to have a little bit more of that treatment, come to Raksa and try it out for yourself. Thanks so much, everyone.